connection into your consciousness by tuning into Contact Talk Radio.
And on TuneIn.com, Ping.fm, and UpSnap Mobile.
Contact Talk Radio.
Welcome to What the Health, an independent approach to your health span. Have you noticed how our healthcare system may not have your best interest in mind? Join Dr. Eckel in this fun and sometimes disturbing exploration of the state of healthcare and what it means for you. Now, here's your host, Dr. Eckel.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to What the Health. I am Dr. Greg Eckel, and it's true. Sometimes the opinions expressed on this station can be disturbing. And in particular, what we're going to talk about today is detox. So, what I laid out in this whole podcast of the why of What the Health is, we are all one, pretending to be separate in this reality. And just recently, life experiences have really drove that home. I have a great certainty around that. And that one is much larger than just humanity. I think, this Gaia, this planet we live on, this life-giving source that we are on really is giving us a ton of signals. And, as we look at, we just can't just migrate up into a virtual reality or up into the gray matter of our brain of what happens in the macrocosm happens in the microcosm. And so this whole concept today that we're going to talk about is detoxification. And really the root of this is to how do we promote thriving? What I laid out in episode 1. And if you haven't heard it, please go to naturecuresclinic.com. We're going to have them up there. You can just kind of stream these things, and on your commute, please get educated and listen and learn, share with friends and family. But on there, it really has expanded my understanding of what's going on in this plane of existence, but to the point of we got to deal with our cells, we got to deal with our physiology, we got to deal with our auric space, we got to deal, out into the psychic reality, really. I mean, on all of those levels, we can talk detoxification. And with the amount of air toxicity, water toxicity, emotional toxicity, ancestral toxicity. I mean, you name it, there is a buildup in the body. And, today what I did, so this is kind of detox for thriving is what we're going to talk about today. And I wrote, down the areas we're going to cover is diet and nutrients, air and water, physical exercise, psychological influences, trauma, xenobiotics, microorganisms, and radiation. And I'm hoping we can cover all of this today because it's juicy, and it really is important across the board for all of us if we want to maintain our health, get our health back, maintain homeostasis, and actually thrive. This is a huge piece of it. You're going to see this in just a moment. What came to me as a student, you get into naturopathic school and you get into detoxification, and there's all these funky diets, and everybody's cleansing all the time. And it became very evident to me, I did not want to become the canary in the coal mine. You don't want to be the canary in the coal mine either, meaning some people are always detoxing or cleansing forever in this state of impurity. And I am not a proponent. I don't like that aspect. We're going to learn a lot. We are very powerful beings. We are creators. And we're very adaptable. We can adapt to a lot of these toxicities, sometimes good, sometimes bad. We're going to talk about that today. But we are very powerful. And so, yes, the environment does have this influence on us, and we're able to withstand a lot as well. And that will come into discussion around genetic pleomorphisms and SNP, single nucleopeptides, and what your genetic platform is and how susceptible to environmental issues you are as well. But, really, you don't want to be the canary in the coal mine, meaning, what the canary in the coal mine, I'm from Western Pennsylvania originally, right? So this is really apropos for me and my family lineage and heritage. They'd take a canary down in the coal mine with them because it had less levels of the cup of the canary is much smaller than a human man down there in the mine. So if the canary died, everybody knew, let's get the heck out of here, because the oxygen concentration isn't what it should be. We got too much methane gas, I think it was. So with that, this gene environmental connection, there's certain strengths and weaknesses with that. When we're talking about individualized medicine and this whole genetic overlay, a lot of folks are using genetic testing and checking that out, and the influence in health. Well, it isn't I always put an asterisk when I'm talking about genetics and health, but it is important to know, and we are going that way with our discussions, with the research, and our understanding, but it's still in its infancy. And it really is not take this genetic test and here's your supplements. That should not happen. There's nothing to support that. There is, however, a lot of evidence around, those are your SNPs or your deficiencies or strengths. You may want to consider these different ways of cleaning up your genes. And a colleague of mine has a great book on that called Dirty Genes. And so I'll just kind of prompt that for the Dirty Genes book. So in there, we're going to start out with talking about diet and nutrients. And there was an amazing study done earlier on. It went from 1988 to 2000. And so I took some notes for today's show. And this was out of Europea. It was a European study, Seneca and Fine study. And this is really the backbone. Food is our medicine. They looked at 70 to 90-year-olds and their adherence to a Mediterranean diet. So this isn't even dealing with levels of toxicity, just inflammation. So it was Mediterranean diet and healthful lifestyle. It was associated with a greater than a 50% lower rate of all-cause and cause-specific mortality. Now, 50% for all-cause mortality and cause-specific, so like cardiovascular disease, diabetes, etc., but also all issues of dying, 50% reduction. Like, there is not a bigger lever except for stopping smoking that you could do. Now, I'm not advocating the Mediterranean diet, but food as medicine, definitely. Every patient coming into Nature Cures gets a diet diary. And you've got to look at food, and because it's our information coming in. I mean, it's sun energy that went into plants and animals that we then consume. But then on this detoxification, we got to look at, levels of toxicity. We have so many pesticides in our environment. It goes right into the crops, and we then ingest it. In North America, interestingly enough, there's a ton of gluten sensitivity and celiac disease, which is actual inflammatory response to gluten in the bowel. Well, why is that? I have patients that go to Italy and they can eat the wheat over there. Now, they're not celiac patients, but they have gluten sensitivity. So why is that? Well, one, in North America, we only grow 3 varietals of wheat. I know this because a friend of mine had an organic farm off the coast of British Columbia on Salt Spring Island. And he basically had the big agriculture mob show up at his door saying, hey, you got to burn your crop out there. He had planted like 120 varietals of wheat. So it's a wide and varied species, but we're only, in North America, they agreed, only three of those are only allowed here. So these specialty grains, they're still growing them in Europe and in Italy. In fact, all of the pastas have a different grain associated with them. So it's not all just white floured processed wheat. And I think that's why people can tolerate it better over there and not so much here. The other issue in North America is the Roundup Ready crops. So even on some organic crops, they're dousing them in Roundup to exponentially boost the yield of the wheat. And, that is a known cancer-causing agent. And in fact, one of my heroes is Professor Serralani out of, I believe he lives in France. I saw his first lecture in the United States a few years ago at an environmental medicine conference. And I mean, the guy, he is a hero. Monsanto came after him with a vengeance. He had published research in the Journal of Nature, and Monsanto went, it was like basically a decade attack, and had him recant some of his original research out of his lab. But what he did, and he shared all of this research with us, he took, Monsanto has Roundup. On there, the active constituent labeled as glyphosate. Glyphosate is a known cancer-causing agent. What Professor Seralani's research showed was when you use Roundup as a whole product, it's 99 times more toxic and cancer causing than just glyphosate by itself. And he, basically stating that it is a crime against humanity what is going on. And we see that, now the courts are actually agreeing on that. There was some like $3 billion settlement on one case. I'm hoping more to come on that front for that, because there's such cross drift with that pesticide, and it is a known cancer causing agent. I mean, heck, they're even finding it in Cheerios, and we wonder why 50% of the population will develop cancer in our lifetimes, or one of every two people in your lifetime will develop some type of cancer if you're not doing any of this stuff that we're going to talk about today, because this stuff is in our bodies, and it does cause trauma, and it does cause inflammation, and it causes cells to misbehave. So diet, really coming back into this diet nutrition, it's a huge component. The part of the healthy lifestyle, which we're going to talk more about in the exercise component, but 30 minutes of walking a day was really what they found in that study. What is the Mediterranean diet? So it is healthy carbohydrates. Somehow carbs have gotten a bad name. There's some Grain Brain book by Perlmutter that I will love to talk to him about on this show. So not all grains are evil. And in fact, we need the micronutrients, the vitamins, minerals out of those whole grains. It is the sugar death, or I call it the white death. Is just consumption of sugar. High fructose corn syrup should never be in your diet. That's a known toxin. But secondly, just sugar in general. I mean, I got a sweet tooth that I will share with you on this show, but it's not a good thing long term, right? We know sugar spikes insulin up, glucose spikes, insulin spikes, and that causes all kinds of issues for health in the body. So carbohydrates, they're highly unrefined, they're fiber rich, they're plant phytonutrient dense. They are anti-inflammatory in nature. And really, we should be looking at the carbohydrates as far as a glycemic response of that cascade of glucose comes in, insulin responds, shuttles it into the cell. Well, that creates some inflammatory responses, among other things. So you've got to watch your glycemic index or glycemic load. Definitely cut out white carbohydrates, breads, pastas, potatoes, sweets, alcohol, limited amounts, and or do some damage control with activated charcoal, glutathione, antioxidants, these things. And then here's one of the genetic gene environment linkages. So if you have, for an example, the SNP, the single nucleopeptide, 219G going to T, it's a polymorphism in there. So it's a hypersensitivity to saturated fat in the diet. It'll increase your inflammatory response and raise your likelihood of getting metabolic syndrome and type 2 diabetes. So, there was a really interesting debate. Joel Kahn, who is a plant-based cardiologist out of Detroit, and Chris Kresser, who's a functional medicine expert out of the Bay Area, on Joe Rogan's show. You don't have to listen to it because it was 3.5 hours. I enjoyed every minute of it. And they went through the research, and they both did a really good job talking about it. But from a plant-based, so basically what I came away with is there is room for all types of diets. There's research to support the pros and cons of all kinds of diets, and we got to find what diet works best for you on a physical level, on an emotional level, and on a spiritual level. So it's not all one diet fits all. It's not the Mediterranean diet for everybody. However, it's a good model to go off of. If you like models, which I do, I like lists to choose from. I do like spontaneity as well, but you can definitely, you got to fine tune it for you. And so find a practitioner that can really help with that. And then also in the diet discussion, I want to bring up essential fatty acids, because this is one that I find on everybody's diet diary we're missing. These are the omega-3 fatty acids that for neuroendocrine disruptors, so the POPs that we'll talk about, in inflammation profiles. These are really, they're called essential, is that essentially you can't make them in your body. You can only get them from your diet. So that's diet nutrients as a discussion around detox. So definitely buying organic as much as possible, really being conscious about what you're putting in there. If you have a negative thought process about a food, it's like 10 times worse. So like, oh, I know I shouldn't be having this dark chocolate. Well, some people can have that in moderation. It can be a health superfood for you, but so the mindset really is key, but also the physical source. Like, I think we can create a whole new economy by just supporting the industries and the companies that have this ethic of, let's pay attention to Mother Earth, Gaia. We're plugged in, we're growing in reverence and understanding. We're conscious about our relations and the values that we create at work. We're also looking at the influence and impact on the supply chain. Is this a sustainable industry? Is it harvested in a sustainable way? Are we replenishing Mother Earth with nutrients when we grow the food? It's not just a take system. That's what we got, and now we got 1% up at the top kind of getting that all. And I think we're all going to go to thriving healthcare. And actually over the weekend, a friend just said, yeah, healthcare is the revolution, taking care of our health on all of these aspects. So this really fits in here well. So the next topic is air and water. I'm going to take a quick station break. This is Dr. Eckel, and you've joined What the Health. If you're just tuning in, please check out our episodes on the Contact Talk Radio Network. We are out to promote healthcare as thriving and sharing all of that information with you. Today's topic is detox for thriving, and we're looking at all of the different facets of that. So we're up to air and water. And this, really started the ethos of environmental connection to health. Rachel Carson with Silent Spring really measured this. As an undergrad, I actually went up to Love Canal. I had some professors that we'd take van excursions up to Love Canal in New York. And Love Canal, if you're not familiar with it, this is, it was a big early environmental tragedy in the United States. They built a school basically on a toxic waste dump, and the amount of cancers that came in those kids and their families was astounding. And it all got traced back to, we built the school on a toxic waste dump. So, you want to know what's in your environment because it can affect you. Our Stolen Future was the next book in '96. I was studying environmental studies and basically came up with the bumper sticker, Save the Humans. The planet is going to be here forever. We just may not make it on it. And this air and water, these are crucial, right? We got Flint, Michigan with lead toxicity in their drinking water. Well, lead and these heavy metals, when you look in North America, the population, we all have heavy metals in it. It's mercury, cadmium, arsenic, lead. I find these in pretty much everybody, so much so that I had to stop testing because, what do you do with it? It doesn't always cause you a health issue. We know that they're not normally found in the body. They are ubiquitous in our environment, and they're getting bioaccumulated from the food that we eat and the environment that we live. So air and water, when you look at this, so on air, you can look at oxygen as a limiting nutrient. So, I do a lot of hyperbaric oxygen therapy. I'm a firm believer in getting oxygen into our bodies to help our bodies heal. I see so many patients come into my clinic with anemia. Well, what is anemia? It's, by definition, it is low red blood cell count. Well, why is that an issue? Well, because the red blood cells, there's 4 irons that create the red blood cell, and they carry oxygen into your tissues. Well, why is that a big deal? Well, oxygen is needed for energy production of every cell of your body. Western docs blow it off. Oh, it's so common. I see people, oh, I've had anemia for 10 years. My doc says it's totally normal. It's like, no, it's totally common, not normal. And when you think about it, like not enough oxygen, that is a showstopper. And so you got to look at the quality of the air that you're breathing, right? So, particulates associated. So air particulates. So like when there's a bunch of fires around you, you actually see smoke, that is particulates. Higher incidence of cardiovascular illness and pulmonary disease. Well, it's like you're smoking a couple packs of cigarettes a day in smoke, or you live in a city with really bad air quality. That affects us. So we've got to deal with that. So one concept, it was so cool, I wrote it down. And so it's the more pathways available, the greater the metabolic degree of freedom and the more resilient the functional physiology. So meaning, the more pathways that the body maintains homeostasis for a different network, you have a greater metabolic flexibility and freedom. And I love that word freedom around health. I love it around finances. I love it around love. I just love that word freedom. But here we're going to talk about it in a detox pathways wise. So oxygen as a limiting nutrient. So air that we breathe is about 20% diatomic molecular oxygen, the O2. The cell, tissue, or organ deprived of oxygen loses homeodynamic potential and shifts to fermentation, which is an anaerobic metabolism, and the cells become more acidic. So perhaps you've tuned into this whole discussion around acidity versus alkalinity, wanting to, alkalinize your body to decrease your chances or risks of getting cancer. Well, the other thing that can alkalinize your body is deep breathing. And we have a lot of technology from our ancestors of deep breathing, yoga, rebreathing. We've got dance, physical therapy, meditation. I use a lot of hyperbaric with my patients to get extra oxygen into the system. Without good, adequate oxygenation, nothing works as well as it should. So this is a foundation on a detox. Deep breathing and meditation are two that I put into everybody's cleanses. And we're doing about 1 to 2 cleanses a year in my clinic. I try to get in 3 cleanses a year because, I gotta maintain myself at a very high level. If I'm going to be the picture of thriving for us, we'll get that down. One of the things that we'll do, we'll get a break here at the 30-minute mark. Is we really do put in the really deep breathing, and I'll say just take 4 deep belly breaths at every stoplight or stop sign that you come into. It's just one way to have an external reminder to get some nice deep belly breaths in that contracts your diaphragm, pulls on cranial nerve 10, puts you into a rest and regenerative state, kind of relaxation, and we need more of that, as we'll see here in a moment. And then we're going to talk about water. So that's the air component, and definitely air quality is a big one. We don't want to rule back the regulations on air quality in this country. In fact, we want to make them, we want to go to a clean energy economy. I mean, it will create a ton of jobs. It nourishes the earth. It nourishes our communities. It nourishes our families. It nourishes our soul. That is the way that we need to go quicker to the green economy. So, if you're listening and you're at all politically active, please vote for people that have that on their agenda, because it does make a difference. Water, it binds to and maintains proper function. There's a great book out by Botman Jolly called "The Body's Many Cries of Water," and in there, in the water, he basically just he was locked up in Iranian prison, and he has case after case of different conditions that were cured with water. Oftentimes in my clinic, it's the first recommendation is to drink half your body weight in ounces of water. It just helps. It does the body good, right? Water does. So dehydration, how does that affect us? Well, it decreases your energy. It increases neurotoxicity because there's not enough buffering. There's not enough fluid to carry waste products out of the body. every organ goes into a dysfunctional state, being dehydrated. You can get muscle cramping, sore muscles, reduced mental clarity, constipation, fatigue, and sensitivity to toxins. So that's just dehydration. There's a skin turgor test. You can pinch your skin, and it should just tensile back just to flat. If it stays up there, you're chronically dehydrated. But also another great way to tell is when you pee, is it clear? Because you definitely want to have that clear. That means you're well hydrated. So water, we've got, what do we put in the water though? So definitely I've done lectures on environmental toxicity. There's not a body of water in the United States that doesn't have some level of toxicity. We've got mercury contamination. The fish then are eating the mercury, and then we eat the fish. There's pesticides. There's chlorine as a water treatment component. There's fluorine. So the communities that fluoridate their water, put fluorine in the water, it's a known bone toxin, and we wonder where osteopenia and osteoporosis is coming from, and we're like toxing people out with the fluoride. I'm all for fluoride use topically. I don't really want it in my water. I don't want any medications in my water, honestly. And then there's also contamination and overuse issues. So, drawing down aquifers, having contamination in water, etc. So water is, we could have a whole hour-long discussion on water. We won't do that today, but it's an amazing molecule. We need clean water, and we got to stay hydrated. I think what I'm going to do, we're going to go into, we'll go into a little station break here. I think I've got Cameron on the line that can do that for me. You're tuning in. This is What the Health, and I'm Dr. Greg Eckel. We're going to be right back.
In outer circles runs into my world with love like sequence.
You've listened to the shows on CTR, and perhaps you've found yourself thinking, maybe I should host my own show, but I don't know how. It's easier than you think. From the beginning, with private coaching sessions to your own live broadcasts, CTR Network will prepare you on every level to share your knowledge, expand your brand, and take your business to the next level. At CTR, we nurture your vision and make it a radio reality. Contact Cameron Steele at 425-221-3646 or Cameron at ctrnetwork.com and put your dream into motion today.
He runs in outer circles, runs.
All right, welcome back there. We are in on the Detox for Thriving podcast here of What the Health. I'm Dr. Greg Eckel. You can check this out at naturecuresclinic.com, and we also are on the Contact Talk Radio Network. So thanks for tuning in. We're up to physical exercise. So movement and circulation and blood. So we just talked about water and air, quality and diet and nutrients to start it out. We're now into physical exercise, and this really works on circulation. And why is circulation so important? This is the concept and overlay with Chinese medicine here, is the quality of information in the blood. So we've got immune system, we've got oxygen, vitamin, minerals in, carbon dioxide, waste products out. We've got all of your neurotransmitters, your immune system, hormones, etc., all circulating in the blood. Exercise really gets the blood moving, right? And it builds up tissue. It also helps with movement of the blood, so to get back to the liver to be filtered. And it's basically the definition of exercise is increased or above resting muscle activity. So just a basic, and sometimes when I say exercise, that seems a little bit loaded. So I just call it movement in my clinic. We want people moving their body of what feels good. How do you move? I was just out at a music festival. One of the best ways that I've found to recharge for this body, just dancing in the forest, like to great music with a lot of community and friends. Like that is supercharged, and it really gets the muscles going, and it keeps me physically fit. So I just build it into my lifestyle. but you can do it however you want. So there are different ways. There's anaerobic activity, which is like sprinting. There's endurance training, which is more aerobic naturally. And then there's resistive, like muscle, like weightlifting. And all of those are, I actually incorporate all of those into my lifestyle. I think that you should really look at ways, I think for health span and longevity, putting some weights in to put that stress and strain on the muscles. Not that we want to turn into like Arnold Schwarzenegger, but we definitely want to you firm up those muscles. It makes your body way more sensitive to insulin, reduces your risk of cardiovascular illness. All-cause mortality is 30 minutes a day, substantial decrease in all-cause mortality. So we know movement is good. Sometimes, we're not going to make the trek over to the gym to get in there. If you do that, great, keep it going. But, I get a tracker. We all wear these dang phones now. You can see how many steps you took in a day. You're shooting for over 10,000 steps a day. That's 5 miles of activity. That's pretty good. And then you can, go for the gold there and, get into whatever your sports are or hobbies, etc. And just keep moving your body. So physical exercise definitely needs to be in here for a detox aspect. Now, if we're doing a specific like 9-day cleanse or 5-day fast, modified fast, we got to watch how much exercise we're doing because we're not getting as much fuel in there during those days. So caloric restriction definitely plays a role in a longevity model and for detoxification. But for exercise, we definitely want it in there. So try to incorporate it into your daily lifestyle. If that's not the case, then get into a routine. Maybe sign up with a buddy and go to a gym or get a personal trainer, get some accountability, and make sure you just show up. Like showing up is 90% of it right there. And then you got to put the work in. Psychosocial influences. So this is a piece, I've put people on media detoxes, and I mean, it's just, now we're getting into it's just never ending news stories, thanks to our leader at large there, who plays it like a violin. It's like insane, actually. He's really good at playing the media. So, and they're just eating it up, and then we eat it up as a result, and everybody gets really stressed out. So I do put people on media detoxes because it's set up to sell soap. That's what I teach my kids. I'm teaching you now. The original advertisers were soap salesmen, and so they were selling soap with the news. And basically, sometimes I wish that maybe leader at large would get his mouth washed out a bit with soap, but that's for another topic. Here, we're going to talk about stress, though, stress in general and what stresses you out. One of the grandfathers of this whole concept is Hans Selye, and he basically said stress is the non-specific response of the body to any demand made upon it, which is pretty wide open. One of my favorite TED Talks, actually, there's I believe a psychiatrist that comes out, 20 years of clinical work, and she starts it out saying, I've been killing people for 20 years. Now, that's a pretty compelling beginning to a TED Talk. And the basic take home was, when a clinician or professional says that stress is negative, you get about 100-fold increase of negativity in the person's response and reaction to the thought process of stress. Stress keeps us alive. Stress is really important. There's good stressors like going on vacation, getting a new home, moving. These are stressors, though. Standing up is the example that I give people. In my office, I'll actually measure the stress response, blood pressure sitting to standing, and looking for, it's called Ragland's test, and you want your blood pressure to go up by 5 millimeters of mercury or more. If it doesn't, it means that you have maladapted to stress, and that stress is winning the game, meaning the saber-toothed cat is coming to eat you, and you either fight or flight. Now, there is a third component, it's freeze, but fight or flight. And when your blood pressure drops 10, 20, 30 millimeters of mercury or more, so 30 points on that, you probably get dizzy with position change, and it's telling us you don't have an adequate cortisol or stress response. So what is that? Under stress, what happens? Well, we release cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine. It shunts blood from the gut, so we're not digesting very well. And it goes to the large muscles of the legs and the core. It also goes up to the eyes, so you can see what's coming at you, and you can run like hell. So that's where the saber-toothed cat, or fight. right? But it's the aspect of chronic stress that is just depleting us. I mean, now stress is, your computer doesn't move fast enough. You're stuck in traffic, the damn daily news, it's all over the place of, the information our modern minds take in now versus the Middle Ages. I mean, I think it's like the equivalent of one day of the New York Times was a lifetime of information for some folks in the Middle Ages. So it's a lot different, and our filters haven't adapted. We're still that animalistic being with a soul in there, but it's still responsive, right? That limbic system is so tuned to negative, it keeps us alive. So we really got to focus in on what do we put on the teeter-totter over here to get that stress response built, or balanced out. In here, chronic stress, it's cumulative, it's an allostatic load. Not enough sleep, sugars, not enough exercise, too much alcohol, primary relationship stressing you out, financial woes, you name it. All of those things in there, it's going to affect your heart. So the cardiovascular disease goes up, gastrointestinal illness goes up, irritable bowel, Crohn's, colitis, these things that we're shunting blood out of our guts. We don't digest well. We get more gas and bloating, more commensal microorganisms come in there. Hormone dysfunctions, right? So on that Ragland's test, there's an endocrine triangle. We've got thyroid, adrenal gland, and hormones: testosterone for men, estrogen, progesterone for women. There's feedback loops in all of that. So if the adrenal gland isn't functioning, we've got to look at your thyroid, which is basic metabolic rate. Why do people put weight on when they get stressed? Because it just skews their hormones so much that you just start loading on the adipose tissue. And then we look for women, estrogen, progesterone, looking at more menstrual disorders, growths, cysts, etc. And for men, testosterone, we know that's a pandemic happening now, is the castration of men in North America. There's a high estrogenic load and environmental toxicities that's driving testosterone down to the point that the labs are changing the reference range to accommodate this castration of men environmentally. They just lowered the level from 1,200 nanograms in your blood to 900 in certain labs. So, a 300-point drop of testosterone, just because that's the samples coming in, it's 1 to 2% drop of testosterone a year over the age of 40 for men. That's not normal. That's common, but that's not normal. So stressors definitely do that. There was an interesting component. There is an uplifting piece here. So stress-related illnesses are less likely if, and this is a great list. So if we have an outlet for our frustrations, if we have a hobby, if we have predictive information, meaning it's just not chaotic, like we don't, we have some stability, we've got some routines, we've got some certainty in our lives. So that predictive ability or predictive information. We have a real or imagined sense of control. That's a whole philosophical debate. Do we have control in the universe? Is it chaotic or controlled or orderly? I mean, you can probably make cases for both of those, but I like this, that it's a real or imaginary. What we know about creative visualization and the power of the mind is these are powerful goal achieving machines. What you put in, what you're thinking is so important in that it can really create a subatomic change. I mean, that sounds pretty woo-woo, but quantum realities are fast approaching here, and we really need to get into this, and that those thoughts up there, while it's a dangerous neighborhood to go into by yourself. I've always said that. And so journal, just get the garbage out. Like, don't keep reciprocating or recycling it around and around and playing that out. So it's real or imagined sense of control. If we can interpret stress favorably, like I mentioned, on vacations, on promotions, on buying a new house, moving, etc. It can be very juicy and spicy and keep us alive on the utmost level. Not that we're adrenaline junkies, but that we have a favorable connotation when we say the word stress. If I say the word stress and that's causing you stress, you know you have a negative connotation to stress. So think of it in the positive, spin it that way, because, ultimately we have two states of being. There's a beautiful state or a state of suffering. If you're in a state of suffering and you like it and enjoy it and you're consciously choosing, by all means, wallow in it and delve in it, like really explore what is there for you. But also know you have a choice to live in this other spot, which is called a beautiful state, which is where I want joy and love and abundance and synchronicity. And I mean, just really the magic happens there. And I strive to be in that beautiful state as much as possible. And in particular, because I've got the data on what stress does in a negative fashion. So I want to put that in a positive fashion. So I want to be, producing at high levels and have, I've got lives on the line here at Nature Cures Clinic, and I take that seriously. I've got my whole family. I've got my employees' families. I've got my patients' families. I have the community best, in my mind of what I'm doing on a daily basis here. So you got to interpret stress favorably. And then the big one that I want to highlight here is we have social connectedness. And when you look at the blue zones, and this is a book that was out on longevity and the health span, where the most people living over 100 years old, where do they live? And they just circled on a map these blue zones. So it's like Loma Linda, California. It's in Greece. It's in Costa Rica. It's in Okinawa, Japan. So there's these enclaves of people. And when you look at the social connectedness, richness of those communities, it is profound. And so building, one of my goals in this year is really deepen my connections in community and make new friends and really make those connections for folks on a community-wide basis, because it is so important. Going through grief and loss can be super lonely and isolating. And one of the biggest hurdles that I had to put out of myself, one of my growth components was on that asking for help, of putting out my vulnerability. And I was so surprised and heartwarmed on the outpouring of like, wow, I had community, like even just strangers in community. Like, how can that be? But so many people supporting me and my family, and just that return on asking for help to test the waters. And you actually get to see who your true community is. And it may not be the people that right there in your closest proximity. So I encourage you to explore that. Really, I know introverts say, oh, it's so tough to have community and whatnot, but I would love to hear about how pleasantly surprised you are, or what comes up for you around, really exploring that community network, because they look at being alone is actually worse than smoking. So like that is that mindset. While you may be living rurally, you may be by yourself. If you're listening to this, you've got community, but also I would say tap into your resources locally in real time, like the aspect of being with other people, whether it's, I think it's a component of religions and church, of going every week, you're in a community, and that there are some social ties and there's some health benefits of that. If that's not your jam, that's okay. Whatever your hobby is, or like-minded individuals, go and do that. And so I'll challenge you to get in there, get out there and do that. Awesome. So you are listening to What the Health. I am Dr. Greg Eckel, and today's topic is Detox as thriving to really promote healthcare that really does make you thrive out there. So we have so much material to cover. I am so excited about this. I'm going to go through this next one. We're going to see how far we get. I think this is going to be a two-parter because it is so juicy of a topic and hits on so many levels, and we're just breaking the ground here. Now, this is a big topic on trauma. So detoxing and trauma. So a lot of times when you say detox, most people think, oh, you're going to give me a colon cleanse. Am I going to be on the toilet all day? Well, we're talking about trauma now. And one of these, another concept that I love that I'm going to read to you is the living human body functions in part as a spatially oriented metabolic field engaged in the conduct of spatially ordered metabolic processes. Well, what in the world does that sentence mean besides the spatially dynamic aspect or spatially oriented dynamic field? That concept really gripped me. And on trauma, we know these ACE scores, it's adverse childhood experiences. Most anybody growing up in North America, this is not even talking about refugees or war-torn countries. The ability, what happens under trauma and stress like that is certain genes get turned on, the warrior genes, and it primes you for even greater stress response. And what happens through time and generation after generation is it may not even be your trauma. It could be your great-grandmother, great-great-great-great-grandmother's trauma. I see this a lot of folks that come from any genocide or war-torn countries that have that background in their lineage. Looking at it, intergenerational stressors, unresolved trauma clearly places significant demand on the body, and over time is a major contributor to major health concerns and issues. And trauma. So what is the issue with trauma? So it causes effects of distortion of the mechanics of cellular breakdown, secondary to frank tissue disruption, and consequent local and systemic responses. So that's like a blunt force trauma or psychological trauma. We know, childhood abuse is rampant in the North America, and that has really profound effects as we age, and that circles back around kind of in the midlife passage, even for folks that went through tons of counseling and talk therapies, body therapies, etc. It typically will come back up again. So these traumas, we've got to come up with technology that helps us clear them out of our body. Last week I talked about asthma and allergy, and I gave an adjustment to a woman that was in a chronic asthmatic acute attack on all of the medications, really like getting scary, can't breathe. And I adjusted her back and she broke into tears. And I thought, I broke a rib. But she's like, no, I had this memory just released out of my tissue. And, we store these memories, we store these traumas in our tissue, in the cells. It's like the limbic system gets stimulated and that signal goes out throughout the body. An amazing book on this topic is The Body Keeps the Score. That ties so much of the work that I do and my thinking of health all together, right? Because it's using complementary therapies, it's using more Western medicine approach, it's using hyperbarics, it's using EMDR for rapid eye movement therapies to clear chronic traumas and post-traumatic stress disorders. So this aspect of trauma on the body, we've got this concept of allostatic load. So what is that? That's a cumulative long-term effect or toll taken on the body by frequent repetitive activation of the autonomic nervous system. So that fight or flight stress response that I was saying I measure with blood pressure sitting and standing. This, has got to be in everybody's intake. If you're looking for complete programs and complementary care, we've got to address this at that level. There's some compelling stuff that's coming out. I put in my book, Shake It Off, A Fancy Approach to Parkinson's, around traumas and the activation of these misfolded proteins in the brain and actually all chronic neurodegeneration. And that's how I got into this and put this link in here. Is it's so vital for our vitality. Did an interview. I've got an online summit coming out August 24th as well, that you may be interested. It's free. I'll mention it next week as well, and I'll have the links on my website. But interviewed a fascinating author, Sarah Payton, and she's got a book, Your Resonant Self, and it's phenomenal, her work. She's got some free meditations online as well to help with this. I think sound healing, singing, saltwater baths, talk therapy, EMDR, hyperbarics, music frequency. I did mention that, but I'll mention it again. This is so important for our healing. And I think a lot of the ancient traditions of passing the information through song. And old chance, if you did any of those DNA like Ancestry or 23andMe, and you got where your highest level of genes are from, well, I encourage you, go back and pull those ancient stories from wherever your tribe is from, and those stories, like, bring the songs, people. Like, let's get some more singing going here. But go back to those traditional stories, the mythology, and the song transmission, because I think our ancestors really did us a favor on the singing and song tradition. Just recently introduced to this amazing song out of Africa. Just really shook me to my bones. I'll put a link somewhere on here for you to listen to. I'll have it on my YouTube channel. That's right. I'll put it on there. It's just a beautiful African goddess song of love and a necklace, and had about 30 people singing that, and had just chills on my spine with it. It was just so beautiful, felt so embraced. And it's not even my tradition, but to hear it in harmony and chorus and singing it, I learned the song, just to be able to clear that junk out of my cells, and that frequency and vibration is so important. I think that's how acupuncture works as well. Grounding techniques, getting out to the ocean, or putting your feet on the planet. These are all ways that we can clear traumas and come back into homeostasis and healing. Oh yeah, so there's research to support what I'm talking about here, just in case you were wondering. So patients with the highest allostatic load, so that allostatic load again was the cumulative long-term effects of chronic, unrelenting stress situations. They scored most poorly on their cognitive scores and their physical functioning later in life. So that was in 70 to 90-year-olds there as well. And when you look at the rise of Alzheimer's, dementia, all these chronic neurodegenerations, well, why? Maybe it's because we're carrying these traumas, our own and our ancestors, forward. In childhood abuse, classic one, these folks, as they grow older, higher levels of anxiety, depression, PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder, higher likelihood of having post-traumatic stress disorder after major traumatic events as well. And so, we want to, you got to have a trauma-informed practitioner, because it is so crucial for your health and healing. It just expedites the whole process. Certain things that I'll do, also I'll do Qigong, which is energy work similar to Tai Chi. And then another favorite just at home is doing a saltwater bath, and just table salt, no exotic salts, just cheap bulk sodium chloride, but supersaturate your bathtub. So you want like 6 to 8 cups per bath. And you'll sweat like you've never sweated before. It basically pulls toxins out of the body. I think it also clears our auric space. It's very regenerative and regenerating. So if you just feel like I'm in a funk and, kind of going in a downward spiral, just start with the bath, saltwater baths. That's a great start. Of course, if you have childhood abuse and or systemic cultural abuse, racism, fascism, war, etc. Well, that's a greater story. Like, we've got to address that as a heart-centered being, acknowledging those traumas. But also there are some great therapies, cognitive behavioral therapy. One of my favorites for deep-seated, like for veterans coming back from war or refugees from countries of war, is EMDR. And there's some great research on that, where it's not, you don't have to process or go back through any traumas. It's movement of the eyes, which gets to the brainstem, which is a precortical function, and it can help clear some really deep traumas really quickly for folks. On the PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and healing the brain, getting on omega-3 fatty acids and getting into a hyperbaric chamber to really hyper-oxygenate the brain and get it going again are great ways to go. Now, we we are barely touching the surface. I'm going to invite you back next week. We're going to do part 2 of this detox for thriving. We're going to talk about xenobiotics, one of my favorites. It's also a great Scrabble word. Microorganisms, so your microbiome and how that activates your immune system. And then radiation and this whole component of 5G network coming online and what that does for us. And also some steps that you can take for you and your family on how to protect against this stuff and how to detox to really promote thriving, because we really are all in it together. We got to address this stuff. It's not going away. So we got to learn to adapt, live, and thrive in that environment. And while we're making the systemic changes to get our clean air, clean water, clean food back. All right. So again, this is Dr. Greg Eckel. This is What the Health. I hope you're enjoying the show. Please leave some comments if you like it. Share it with your friends and family. Come back to the Contact Talk Radio. We are here Tuesdays from 2 to 3. So thank you for listening.